no hope. Ye who enter here.
This incident was relayed to me by my cousin. She works at the outpatient section of TTSH. Please be aware that the TTSH hospital I'll be writing about is the current, newly built hospital and not the old one. That night was as usual. She was getting ready to go home when one of the nurses there asked her if she didn't mind checking some paperwork before she went, so she decided to stay for a while. The checks didn't take long. She managed to finish the papers before 6:30 p.m, the time when the janitor would come to lock the doors of the respective outpatient sections. As she was walking happily towards Novena, she realized that she had forgotten her wallet. She rushed back to the hospital so that she could catch the janitor before he locked her section. As she was running frantically down the corridor towards her clinic, she saw the janitor locking the door. She shouted for him to stop, telling him that she had left something behind. For whatever reason, he ignored her. She continued running towards him, running and shouting. Finally, as she was about 3 feet away from him, he turned towards her and smiled. What she saw freaked her out. The janitor's face was hideous, and his skin looked as if it had been bitten off by thousands of maggots. Before she fainted, she heard him say,
Did you forget something, my child?
When she regained consciousness, the real janitor was looking at her. He asked her what happened, and told her that he was a bit late today, as his son was sick. He helped my cousin up, and then told her never to walk along the corridors again after 7 p.m. He never told her the reasons why, and I don't think my cousin wanted to know either. The following is a story based on a true incident in a hospital where I work. I had a patient quite a few months ago who was transferred to my ward from ICU. When the patient came up to the ward, she was telling us, as in the staff around, what she experienced earlier on in the ICU. Incident happened at around 0100 hours during night shift duty. Patient X was sleeping soundly, but woke up suddenly for no reason. She opened her eyes and noticed that there was someone in white with long hair and bloodshot eyes looking at her. She was frightened by that pair of red eyes and that someone was plainly staring, but not doing anything else. So, my patient quickly closed her eyes and chanted some prayers. Another patient, Y, from the room next door, saw the lady at my patient's bedside and was curious as to how come there's visitors so late at night, and thus called the ICU nurse to ask. The nurse, after hearing this, looked into patient X's room and saw the lady, and then went to go to inform the visitor to go home, as it had already passed visiting hours. The nurse opened the door to patient X's room and entered. She then realized that there was nobody except the patient. So the nurse went up to patient X and asked, "Where's that lady who was just now standing here?" Patient X was so scared that she just cried out. But the following few days after the patient was transferred up, she kept on having a high fever, but doctors could not find out the reason. The above story was told by the patient herself and verified by the nurse who transferred the patient up to the ward, as the nurse was the nurse who saw that someone. Another experience I had was when I was working in one of the wards and had to work till 9 p.m. And that's where the eerie part comes. There was this particular patient who liked to sit on the bed or lie on the bed staring blankly at the fan, which was above her. Me and my friends were curious as to whatever thing she was watching, and so we observed her from far. Maybe she realized that we were watching her, and she turned to look at us with big eyes. We quickly looked at something else, and when we looked at her again, she started to stare at the fan again. Maybe there is really something there for her to stare at. Another story is when me and my friend were doing our rounds to see whether the patients are snugly tucked in their beds and comfortably sleeping. There was this patient who couldn't sleep, and so we ended up talking to her. She pointed outside the window and asked us, "What is that?" Me and my friend looked out of the window, but nothing could be seen except for the next building of the hospital. We told her that is another building of the hospital, but she said no. She said there is something else there which bothered her. She complained that she couldn't sleep because of that. We were shocked. Luckily, that time, we were about to sign out, and we told the patient not to worry about that thing and to go to sleep. She refused to sleep, but kept looking outside the window. We then tucked her neatly under the blanket and left her. I asked my friend whether she saw anything, and she said no. Me too. Then, what is it then? When I was admitted to Tan Tock Seng Hospital for appendicitis, I recalled a horrifying tale told by one of the Indian Amar, who always came into the ward I was admitted at to clean the area. Due to boredom for staying in the hospital, I befriended her, and she told me the incident that she had encountered at the old Tan Tock Seng Hospital, which she used to work before. The old Tan Tock Seng Hospital, as we knew it, used to be creepy, with lots of big trees. The lights were very dim, and the pathway was rather spooky, unlike now. It was at that night when the Amar was pushing a trolley at one of the sheltered pathways in the building's premises. On the left side of the pathway stood a number of big and tall trees. The sheltered pathway itself was dimly lit, making the whole place look totally eerie. It was at this moment the Amar suddenly caught something moving about among the trees. The movement indicated that someone or something was running from one tree to another at top speed in a funny and strange running motion. The Amar thoughtlessly stopped and tried to focus her eyes on that area by staring at it. Finally, she caught a glimpse of the shape. The figure looked like a man, and he seemed to be holding a fan, similar to which people used to fan satay when they were cooking it. But the strange thing was that he had an incredibly long pair of legs, 2 times the length of normal human legs, and the creature was playing peekaboo with the Amar. It was so disturbing that the Amar left her trolley there and ran away from that place. She asked someone to collect the trolley later on. The Amar related the incident to a security guard, and the guard explained to her that it was probably a hantu gala or pole ghost. Not sure if it meant any harm or not. This is a story about my encounters at NUH. NUH is located near some forested area. I am a staff member of NUH, working normal shift work, and on that particular day I was working the afternoon shift, which ended at 10 p.m. My office was located on the 6th floor of NUH, main building, and directly facing the forested area with big trees and a staircase leading up the hill. If I look out my window, to my right I could see NUS and a small road parked with cars. It was a normal day for me. My fiancé will always wait for me at the 5th floor staircase which leads to my office. There is a door on the 6th floor by the staircase, and you have to scan the staff pass to enter, so strictly no outsiders. The corridor outside my office is always very creepy, and if I turn to my right, I can see the forest again. So Like other days, I walked as fast as I could and never even turned to my right. As I reached the door which leads to the staircase, I pushed the button to unlock the door. But unfortunately, the button didn't work and the door never opened. I called my fiancé to tell him to go up the stairs as I was very scared. There is a small window on the door and I could see him walking up the stairs. While waiting for him to reach the door so I can ask him to get help for me, I turned around and I don't know why, but something just made me look at the forest, which I never did before. I saw a white figure looking directly at me with long hair somewhere among the trees, but I told myself it was probably just my imagination. Then, suddenly it moved. It looked like it was floating. That was when I realized it was for real, and that was it. I started panicking. I was lucky that it did not come to my direction. I could feel my heart beating so fast, and my legs felt like jelly. I was breathing very fast. As soon as my fiancé appeared near the door, I started crying and telling him I need to get out. He told me to calm down, and like 5 minutes later, while waiting, a technician arrived. Probably they saw us from the security cam. They fixed the button, and I was free. It was a bad day for me. Now, my office has moved to the first floor, which is nearer to the A&E, and definitely safer for me and the rest of my colleagues. An average-built foreign national construction man stood there, panting at the counter. Just another industrial accident dressing, so I thought. Being ignorant, the man helped himself to sit, leaving me wondering if it was a prank. I approached him and asked what happened. Later, I found out he couldn't speak or understand the language. I fetched his identity and assisted him into the treatment room. Meanwhile, I informed my coordinator about his condition, and we suspected him of an asthma trigger. I began to reassure him, and, ironically, he lay on the couch bed with his palm tugged on his cheekbone without any answer. He was still wheezing hard, yet posing that beach paradise island relaxation. He looked deep into my eyes and smiled. I was stunned. I left the room and dashed to my coordinator to handle the questioning in the room. The clinic saw an average crowd that day. I continued the operation. Amidst the strong voice of my coordinator in the room, I sensed this wasn't good. Calling for the doctor's review, my coordinator rushed out for assistance. When noises from the room broke into silence, another colleague peeked to help. Minutes later, "Call the ambulance, now," was shouted from the room. Without further delay, I made the phone call and announced to the patients to stay calm. My curiosity grew as I headed towards the room to find the man was unconscious. Meticulously, the doctor inserted a lifeline, but was unsuccessful while my colleagues resuscitated the casualty with two-man CPR. I could see foam developing from his mouth. Skin was cold and clammy. Eyes were mere bloodshot. Yet we still proceeded with the resuscitation until the paramedics arrived. The ambulance came. No pulse, no breathing. Shortly after investigation, it was declared by the paramedics as a death. Unfortunately, it was the eve of Chinese New Year. Pounding on my disbelief of what happened, some patients made their way out and left large red bags of celebration cookies. The doctor off-rostered himself after that incident. Patients who left never came back. A couple of months later, I received a phone call from HR complaining about the expensive billing usage of oxygen for the employee. Checking the records, sadly, she was referring to that man. I told her of his death. I guess no one knew of the death. Nonetheless, spooks and goosebumps still linger here. Wheezing noises and construction boots' footsteps were often heard. A restless soul? Or just an ordinary legend of the mind's illusions? This story took place during my army days a couple of years back. 12 of us from the same camp shared the same interest in exploring haunted places and looking for ghosts. We went to places such as Lim Chu Kang Chinese Cemetery and Mount Pleasant Cemetery in the dead of night for that adrenaline rush. Fortunately, I did not encounter anything strange until we decided to explore the old Changi Hospital. The old Changi Hospital has since been renovated into a spanking new hospital. However, before that, it was just an old, abandoned, dirty and run-down building. For those of you who have been there, you would know what I mean. This group of friends and I attended a campmate's birthday party at a chalet nearby, and someone suggested that we check out old Changi Hospital since we were already there. We left the party at around 11 p.m. and proceeded to our destination. When we reached there, we followed one of my friends who had been there before. We entered through a side gate leading to a small entrance of the building. When we reached the first staircase landing, that friend suggested that we go up to the highest level and walk along the corridors to the other end of the building. We followed the plan. While we were walking along the corridors, many of us strayed into some of the rooms to peek at its decay. Thus, we did not exactly walk in an orderly manner, with people falling behind and overtaking me constantly. There were about 17 or 18 of us since some friends had brought their girlfriends along, and I did not really remember who were around me. When you are nervous and scared, you do not really pay attention to these details. Eventually, we reached the end of the corridor, and I heard my friend's instruction to take the stairs to the first floor. Those in front started to descend the stairs, and I followed suit. I think I was one of the few who were at the back of the group. Thus, I just descended without paying attention to the level. I thought just follow the person in front of me, and I should exit at the correct level. For those who had been there, you would know that the stairs lead all the way from the top level down to the basement levels. I just continued going down, level after level, and between each level you had to go down 2 flights of stairs. After descending the first, you had to make a U-turn and descend another before reaching the next level. I saw someone in front of me in a white t-shirt going down the stairs. Thus, I followed. As I descended the first flight of stairs and was about to U-turn to go down the next, my friends called out to me. I looked up and saw all of them standing at the top. I turned to look at which level I was going to, and it clearly stated B1. "Where are you going?" asked one of my friends. I did not say anything and just climbed up the stairs to meet with them before exiting the building. I did not mention anything about it, as the old folks always said that if you were to encounter something strange or supernatural, do not talk about it immediately at the location. Just act like you did not know anything. So the question still plagues me till today. Who was that person I was following down to B1? People say that hospitals are the most unclean places in the world. I can't disagree with that, especially when I personally experienced something weird. After my O-levels, I was granted entry to a course in polytechnics. I decided to take up a job during the 6 months period before I went. A job agency helped me to find a job in a hospital in the material management department. I was to send all kinds of equipment to wards and OTs in offices, be it medical supplies or office stationaries. Here are some of the incidents. The lift. At the time, the hospital was not officially open yet. Only its ER and other ICUs were in operation. One day I made my round up to the SICU to pass supplies to the ward. I pressed for the lift, and when it came, I pushed my trolley into it and entered it. I pressed the B2 button for my department. The door closed, and suddenly it opened again. Thinking that there was someone outside, I peeped out, but there was no one there. I pressed the close button again, and the same thing happened again. This happened for 4 times, and this hair-raising feeling got to me, and I exited the lift. The door closed, and it went down. Geez, I thought. Maybe something is wrong with the lift sensors. I waited for another lift that did finally come and bring me down to B2, but a shock was waiting for me. When the door opened at B2, I pushed my trolley out of the lift, and the lift on the left, which was the lift that refused to take me, opened at the same time. What came out of it totally shocked me. Out came 2 attendants with a metal coffin, those that hospital used to transfer the dead to the morgue, and the family of the dead. The family was weeping and crying. This really chilled me to the bone. For the rest of the day, I felt sick and morbid. Was something in the lift awaiting the arrival of the dead? Was that why it did not allow me to go down? The ward. After a month or 2, my supervisors decided to send a group of friends and I to Old Pax Hospital, which was already closed at that time, to retrieve whatever can be salvaged from the old buildings there. The only 2 humans that were there were 2 security guards, a father and son. The first day we went there, I had this feeling that the hospital was covered in a dark aura. The only lift there smelled of disinfectant and death, and it got stuck always in the middle of the 2 stories. Imagine the door opening and you are halfway underground and from the first floor. Most of the electricity was out or cut off too. The place, I guess like all abandoned buildings, looked spooky. One day, I and another guy were assigned to count the total number of metal bed frames left in the hospital. We decided to count from the main building first, from the top level down. It was around 5 p.m. when we reached the 2nd story. We opened the ward door with our keys and walked in. It was a Class C ward, comprised mainly of different rooms by partitions, with no doors in front of the partitions, with a long corridor linking every room. We simply looked in and counted the number of beds. I was doing the counting, and my friend was doing the recording. 7 beds. Okay. 10 beds. Okay. Then I came to the second last room. I peeked in and I just continued to the last ward. 8 beds. Okay. But the second last one you never counted. How many beds? Then it struck me why I never counted the beds in that room. I saw a room, fully furnished. There were mattresses and pillows on each bed with cases and all. Looked like a perfect ward in a hospital. And on the first bed right near the door was this old man, dressed in hospital gown and sitting on the side of the bed, looking directly at me. 8 beds. Oh my God, go. I pulled my friend along and walked fast out of the ward, not daring to look to my left as I passed the particular room. My friend thought I was lazy and whacked me on my back when I was out of the ward. I told him exactly what happened. He scolded me even more. He later told me that when a person were to see any unclean things, they're not supposed to tell others, or their bad luck will pass on to the others. To this day, it still sends chills down my spine just to think about it. There was always rumor, it was going around for some time in the hospital, that something was inside the building. But of course, most of the stories aren't real. Most of them are a fragment of the imaginative human mind. But how do I explain this story? Here is a story about a certain hospital. In this hospital, there have always been complaints from the patients that they were being disturbed in the middle of the night. There would always be knocking loud enough to wake them up, and there would also be reports of pinching by thin air. After some checking, it seemed that all of those complaints were related to one point. All of the complainers would have been warded inside this particular ward. The name eludes me. Let's just call it Ward A. It seemed pretty harmless, but over time the complaints got more and more wild. Soon they had no choice but to close down the ward. However, a doctor offered to try to stay in the ward for a night before it closed. What happened made his skin crawl. He was seated in his bed in Ward A. The lights were still brightly lit. He was reading a book he had just bought to keep him company. It was nearing 9 o'clock in the evening. He yawned. Just then, something seemed to move in the far corner of his eyes. He looked over, expecting to see something interesting, but all that he saw was the chair and the decorative painting on the wall. Disappointed yet relieved, he sighs. 9:30 p.m. The ward's lights are turned off. The doctor switches on his personal lamp that is above his head. Continuing to read his book, he ignores much of the surroundings. 10 p.m. The doctor has had enough of reading the book. He decided to retire for the night. Leaving the light on, he falls asleep. 10:30 p.m. Slight rattling woke him up. He stared at the source of the sound. It seems to have come over from his left side, where the chair was located. He also found that a part of his arm seems slightly pinched. He made a mental note before going back to sleep. 10:50 p.m. Something woke him up. It seems the light was disturbing his rest. He reached out and switched off the light before retiring back to bed. 11:10 p.m. He awoke with a start. He had a bad feeling churning in his gut. Something was not right. The chair, which had been on his left side, had been placed directly in front of the bed. In the moonlight, he could make out a black shape sitting on the chair. That jolted him awake. Now fully conscious, he realized that someone, or something, was mumbling to him. He spun his head over to his left where the chair was. He saw several dark figures staring back at him. Unlike the one sitting in the chair, these dark figures had red, bloodshot eyes. He also saw that more and more of these figures were climbing out of the painting on the wall. Spooked, he screamed. Those shadows just stared back at him with hollow faces. He fainted. After that incident, the ward was sealed for quite a while before a priest was engaged to remove the painting on the wall. Soon after the painting was removed, it seems that everything went back to normal. This is a story that was told to me by my elder sister. She was the kind of person who liked to go exploring and stuff like that. She had this sort of instinct passed down by our dad. An instinct that allowed her to see things others couldn't see. Most people who hear this story might not believe it, except some of her friends whom she told, and who were also there with her on the day that she went exploring. Whoever knows me might know my sister because she is kind of popular. So here I am, telling a story my sister told me about last year. It was about her outing of an exploration which took her to the old Changi hospital. She says that whatever story is written in the True Stories column about OCH mostly isn't true, because she has been there herself and not quite encountered whatever they encountered. But she does have a story to tell from there. My sister, Lynn, was there with her friends last year, 12 guys and 5 girls, during the Hungry Ghost Festival month. She was warned by Dad not to go anywhere bad because the ghosts are surrounding everywhere, but she was too stubborn to listen. She went off with her friends, and they were there to do their ritual, which she was there just to accompany them. But when she was in, she felt a cold shudder. What's lame about the situation was that she was to stand last at the back, while the rest were in front. She was at the back with 2 guys who were her close friends. They were taking a look out the back when they were going through the door to the third floor. She noticed that the door was already open and was stuck open with a block. But what was shocking was that after going through the door, they heard the door close with a loud bang, as though someone was forcing it shut. Being unafraid of anything, they just ignored it and continued to the fourth floor, where they came across 14 good-looking people, guys and girls, who were all very beautiful. They got to know that they too were exploring, so they decided to meet back on the second floor. When they finished their exploration, they continued going up to the last floor to do their ritual. But then they realized something was amiss, but continued the ritual. When they were doing it, they heard babies crying, someone wailing, and dogs barking. They just ignored it, thinking that it's just because they were disturbing them. That's why there were noises. But it still does not explain the noises being heard. Then, when they were packing up to go home, they heard some girl crying as though it was one of them, but none of them were. So, being too freaked out, they decided to walk quickly and meet the other group, which they had just met, and to get out at once. But when they met the group at the second floor, they were alarmed to see one of the girls crying softly. But how could the noise travel so far up was the mystery. After meeting them, all of them went down to go out the back door. But what was shocking was the back door was blocked with some kind of woods, which was not there before. So they decided to go to the front door with the Malay security guard waiting there. So they did. When they were walking to the front, the girl who had been crying earlier was still crying, but what freaked them out the most was when they went out the front door, the whole group at the back of them disappeared and left them 17 instead of being 21. After being spooked, they quickly went to the old man, but all he said was, "There's nothing to be afraid of." But just then, they heard voices laughing, going past them, and heard a guy say, "Goodbye, my friends, nice knowing you." After hearing that, they looked at the old man, but he just smiled at them and said, "Those people you saw are friendly patients who were once here, so you should not be afraid of them." With that, my sister and her friends exchanged goodbyes and continued walking to the bus stop to go home. That was the story she told me, but I'm not sure if it is true. However, her friends with her then said it is, so I'm not sure. So, I am not sure. This happened about 10 years ago when I was in secondary school. That year, I had the morning session. Since my school was in Queenstown and I live in Jurong, I had to leave the house quite early to catch the 7 a.m. bus. Normally, I would get up at 6 a.m. to get ready for school. The night before the incident, my sister and I had difficulty sleeping because it was very warm. We shared the same bedroom. Since our father was working the night shift, we decided to sleep in our mother's air-conditioned room. I still couldn't sleep, so at 5:30 a.m. I decided to take a bath and get ready for school. I took my bath in my mother's bathroom and then went back to my room to get ready. I was combing my hair when I heard somebody calling me, "Sister, sister." I turned around, thinking my sister had woken up, but there was no one around. I went to my mother's room and found my sister still asleep. I grew scared but brushed it off as my imagination. I went back to my room to get my school bag and I heard it again. This time I heard a small child's voice calling me, "Sister." I turned and saw my sister's doll, the one that cries when you take out the pacifier, and its eyes actually blinked at me. I immediately ran to my mum's room and stayed there until 6:45 a.m. Once I got home from school, I took the doll and threw it in the storeroom. Since then, I have banned all dolls from my room. My parents bought me a Snoopy doll, the character that always walks around with a blanket, for Christmas in 1999. It was my first Christmas present, actually. I think my parents bought it for me because it was my first book out during National Service, PTP. I was very touched. The doll was one of those with a turning key behind. You turn the key, release it, and then music starts playing, making the doll's head move. Eventually, I think the spring inside spoiled many years ago. Maybe in 2001 or 2002. Even if you turn the key now, it won't turn back by itself, so there's no music. You need to force it yourself to get the music, and it requires a bit of strength because the inside is quite rusty. However, I still kept the doll because it was a gift from my parents. I didn't touch it and just left it on top of my drawers as a display item. Then, one time, I was inside my room's toilet, doing my business, and didn't close the door properly because I was alone at home. I was reading a book at the same time when suddenly I heard music from inside my room. The music sounded familiar, but I couldn't recall it immediately. It was quite eerie because I was home alone, and the music seemed to come from nowhere. Then it hit me. It was the music from the doll. I was very scared at that moment because I knew the doll was broken, and unless you use a lot of strength to turn a key, it wouldn't play any music. The key is so hard to turn by force, so you have to do it very slowly, resulting in slow music. But the music I heard was at normal speed, which I hadn't heard since 2001 to 2002. After finishing in the toilet, hardly I admit, I peeked slowly into my room. The doll was still sitting there, on the display drawer. Has anyone else had a similar experience or any idea what might have been the reason? Do you think the mechanism suddenly became active again? Or had a last, final burst of life? Since then, I haven't heard the doll play. The key is almost impossible to turn. I'm afraid it might break if I use too much force. This is a scary experience that almost scared me half to death. When my parents got married, the couple who acted as matchmakers gave me a baby doll as a gift to celebrate my birth. The doll was the size of a 2-year-old child with curly brown hair that was almost blonde. The joints in the limbs could be moved, and it was a doll that you could play with by dressing it up and pretending to take care of it. It was a big version of what we now call Popo-chan. However, unlike Popo-chan, it wasn't cute, and its face was Western style, so not only was it not very cute, it was also a little scary. When I put it to sleep, it closed its eyelids with long eyelashes. For some reason, this doll has scared me ever since I was old enough to understand. However, this doll was quite large, and no matter where you put it in the room, it had a presence. So I just didn't like it, and it scared me. When I was in the 2nd grade of elementary school, my parents were transferred and we moved house. I was given my own room for the first time, but the door to the room was warped, so it didn't close smoothly. I had to push it hard to close it, and it made a squeaking sound, so it just didn't close properly. I kept the scary baby doll next to the door, and even though I was scared every day by seeing it, I kept it in my room for some reason. One day, a few years after moving into the new house, I was spending time in my room with the door half open. When I approached the door to move to another room, the half-open door started to close on its own. I wondered if the wind had caused the door to close, and just as I was about to put my hand on the doorknob, I looked at the baby doll next to me and saw that the baby's hand was moving as fast as the door was closing. I couldn't immediately grasp the situation, and I was too shocked to move right away. All I could think was, this is bad. I snapped out of it and opened the door with all my might, just as it was about to close. I then ran to my mother to escape. In a panic, I explained the situation to my mother and told her that I was scared of the baby doll. My mother laughed at how I was panicking, but she moved the doll to another room. After a while, she took it to the storeroom of my paternal grandparents' house because the doll was taking up too much space, and it also began to scare her. I can still find the doll in the storeroom if I search for it, but I'm scared to, and don't feel like getting rid of it, because it's human-shaped, and it feels wrong to do so. I still can't forget the feeling of when that door was closing unnaturally. I also remember hearing a giggling sound from the doll, and the doll's hands moving together. Anytime I think about it, I'm just terrified. Sorry for the long post. Maria is my sister, and Zubaida is my cousin. In the afternoon, Zubaida and our aunties came over. Soon it was night, and our aunties went home. Zubaida stayed over at my house because the next morning we were going to religious class. That night we slept in the double-decker bed. Maria slept on the top bunk, while Zubaida and I slept on the bottom bunk. We went to bed around 11. I couldn't really sleep because we kept talking and giggling. Later, Maria fell asleep. I saw Zubaida pulling at a black hair on the right-hand side near the wall. She asked me to check if it was Maria's hair. I looked up and saw Maria sleeping on the left side, so it wasn't her hair. I told Zubaida it must be her Barbie doll's hair. We decided to ignore it and tried to sleep. But as the room got quieter, I felt weird about the hair. I woke up again at night and saw the hair still there, swaying a little, like it was moving on its own. I was so tired and fell asleep again quickly, trying not to think about it. In the morning, Zubaida climbed up to Maria's bed to see if it was her Barbie. It was, but this time, the hair was yellow. What we saw the previous night was black. It was strange and creepy. Could Barbie have changed its hair color? Or was it ghost hair? We felt a shiver run through us. The room seemed darker, the shadows somehow scarier. Zubaida quickly turned the Barbie's face away, remembering what we heard from our elders. Any dolls or soft toys with eyes should have their faces turned away when someone sleeps beside them. If not, evil spirits can enter them and disturb you. Later, when we told our parents about it, our grandmother listened too. She came over, holding her rosary tightly. She told us an old story about a spirit that attached itself to a doll, haunting the children who played with it. The spirit would show itself changing the doll's hair to black as a warning. That night I was really scared. We kept the lights on and tried to sleep. I woke up and heard a scratching noise from the wall where the hair had been. Zubaida and I were too scared to move. I saw another strand of black hair slowly coming from the bed, almost reaching the floor. It seemed to move on its own. Morning came and we were relieved. Maria, not knowing what had scared us, played with her Barbie doll. Zubaida and I didn't talk about that night again, but we always made sure no doll's eyes were looking at us when we slept. And now, you know our story. If you don't believe it, try it yourself. But remember to turn the dolls' faces away from you when you sleep beside them. This story happened to me during the lunar 7th month, about 5 years ago, at block 262, Yushin Street, 22. I went over to my ex's house for dinner around 6 p.m. After dinner, I was bored enough to play with my ex's niece, nephews, and a bunch of other kids, aged around 5 to 8 years old, in one of the bedrooms. I was watching the kids play when suddenly the 5-year-old niece, Crystal, tripped over an English baby doll. The ones with the blinking eyes, eyelashes, you know, the ultra creepy kind. Crystal started crying, and, like most Chinese parents who hit whatever hurt their precious little child, I picked up the doll and started spanking its bottom repeatedly. It worked, and Crystal started giggling, so I put the doll down on the ground and went to the living room to watch TV. Suddenly, my ex's older sister, Brenda, came out from the adjacent room asking which kid was the little prankster who tapped her from behind several times. Upon hearing the commotion, I asked her what happened. She explained that she was in the bedroom adjacent to the kids' room where the door was left ajar and the lights were turned off because her fiancé was taking a nap. With nothing else to do, she was gazing at the mall opposite the flat through the window when someone tapped her lower back from behind. The first time she ignored it, brushing it off as one of the kids playing a prank on her. The second time, she turned around and caught a glimpse of a half-naked, top-half, kid dashing out of her room. Thinking that the kids were trying to play with her, she looked for them in the other rooms and was puzzled to find that all of them were fully clothed. She was certain of what she saw, but came out of the room puzzled. Who exactly was that little kid who was half naked? Brenda immediately related this incident to her aunt, who then sought help from a bomoh over the phone. A bomoh is basically a Malay shaman. This is where the creepy part begins. The bomoh told her aunt to enter the children's room and look under the bed. He even described a feature for identification: the color of the doll's eyes, which were blue. I accompanied their aunt to the room and retrieved the doll, and to my astonishment, it was the doll that I spanked earlier. At that moment, many questions raced through my head. How did the bomoh know there was a doll under the bed? How did the bomoh know the color of the doll's eyes? Why did the kid not look for me, since I was the one who spanked the doll? The bomoh immediately instructed their aunt to leave the doll under a tree in the estate's park, and we did. After this incident, we went out for supper, and we came back to find the doll already taken from the tree. Some more questions popped up. Who in their right mind would dare to pick up such dolls during the night of the lunar 7th month? My mum always emphasized never to pick up things during the 7th month, as they may be spiritually dirty. I kept quiet about the doll spanking incident for fear of getting a scolding from my ex. Of all the questions that went through my mind that night, only one was answered by another medium who was a friend of my mum. She claimed that I was sort of untouchable by dirty stuff because I have a pair of really thick eyebrows. Glad I have them. This is a story about a haunted doll. This particular doll was about the size and weight of a young toddler, and its name was William. My grandmother bought William at a flea market in the mid-1970s. He, it, whatever, was dirty, naked and torn, but she saw something about him that she liked, so she bought him anyway. She brought the doll home, cleaned it up, bought toddler-sized clothes for it to wear, named it and sat it in the rocker in her parlor. Once or twice a year, grandmother would buy William a new outfit to wear and give him another good cleaning. Then back in the rocker he would go. William sat there for years. William always scared me when I was a kid. Not only did I have a phobia of mannequins to deal with, but William himself was strange looking. He was a very lifelike doll, but his face bore an expression that struck me as much too aware and knowing to belong to a child of the age William was supposed to be. Rather than see him as a toy child, I regarded William as an adult in miniature, and not a particularly nice adult at that. To me, when I was 10, William looked like he knew where I slept and wanted me to know that he knew. If garlic had been a deterrent for dolls instead of vampires, my room would have smelt like a pizza. But William never visited me while I was growing up. and he never gave any indication that he was anything other than a big doll with a strange expression. That was until my grandmother passed away, and William went to live with my Aunt Lorraine and Uncle Nelson. Lorraine's kids, Michelle and David, were 11 and 9 respectively, just about the age I had been when I first encountered William, and their reaction to him was remarkably similar. He made them nervous. Their mother had propped up William on a wingback chair in the living room, and both kids told me that it was eerie to get up at night to use the bathroom and find William, dimly illuminated by the hall light, seeming to watch their comings and goings. From his seat, they said, William could clearly see the doors for both their rooms. Doors they had been keeping closed at night so William couldn't watch them sleeping. Even with the door closed, Michelle remembered recently, it was like I could still feel him staring at me, waiting for me to come out. Eventually, William stopped waiting. One night, David got up to a sleeping house for a trip to the bathroom and was surprised to find that William wasn't in his usual spot. David was the younger of the two children, but also the more level-headed. He decided that his mother must have moved the doll after he had gone to bed, maybe to clean it up or dress it in a new set of clothes, as my grandmother had done. He finished in the bathroom and returned to bed, neglecting to shut his door. As he tucked himself back in, his sleepy eyes widened in alarm. There, back in his usual spot, was William. David leapt from his bed and quickly closed and locked his bedroom door. I didn't know where William had been, he said, but I sure didn't want him in my room. A few nights later, Michelle awoke to take a trip to the bathroom. Casting a wary eye at William, she found him in his usual spot on the chair. On entering the bathroom, she noticed that the toilet paper roll was empty. So, she returned to the hall, where a new package was in the linen closet just outside the bathroom. Once back in the hall, she yelped in alarm. William was crumpled on the floor about 4 feet in front of his chair. To me, she said, it looked like William had climbed down and headed for the open door of my room, but stopped when I came out of the bathroom. Michelle ran back into her room and huddled in her bed. The bathroom could wait until morning. She fell into a fitful sleep and woke early, with the sun just beginning to stream in through her window. Her need for the bathroom was urgent now, so she hurriedly unlocked and opened her door, and screamed, rousing the rest of her family from their beds, because when she pulled open the door, William fell into the room. He had apparently been leaning against the door, waiting for it to open. Lorraine and Nelson couldn't have been oblivious to the goings-on. They couldn't help but notice that their kids had suddenly started locking their doors at night, but they had attributed that to the kids' increasing desire for privacy and the impending rush of puberty. Neither David nor Michelle had mentioned to them their experiences with William, and even though Lorraine had already begun to feel a certain unease about the doll, she never made the connection until the morning Michelle woke her up with her scream. But Lorraine had noticed William's inexplicable refusal to stay put weeks earlier. Nearly every day she would have to put William back in his chair, at least once, and often several times. She had no idea how the doll could keep tumbling out of the big chair. She wasn't able to knock the doll down without applying enough force to actually fling him from the chair, so she saw no way for him to simply fall out. But fall out he seemed to do, over and over again. One afternoon, a few days before Michelle's morning scream, Lorraine hadn't been feeling well, and so laid down for a brief afternoon nap. She awakened an hour or so later to find William in bed beside her. She was initially quite spooked, but soon deduced that one of the kids, who had come home from school while she had slept, had placed the doll there as a joke. It was only later that she decided otherwise. The day Michelle had her morning encounter with William, Nelson put the doll in the attic. He believed none of what the kids were saying, but agreed to hide the doll away to mollify them, for they were genuinely afraid. He told the story to my mother a few weeks later, and she told him that she'd like to have the doll if Nelson and Lorraine weren't planning to keep it around. Nelson agreed and went to the attic to get it for her, and was unable to find it. Nelson tore the attic apart, but William was gone. That was nearly 10 years ago, and William hasn't turned up again since. This is a story from when I was in elementary school. Sorry, but I'm not good at writing, but I love other people's ghost stories. I also get scared very easily. For example, when I'm alone at night, I can't look directly at the mirror or TV screen in my room. That's why I quickly turn off all the lights and hide in bed. In my room, there was a doll that looked like a cheap French doll. I was fine with this doll when I was little, but now I'm afraid of it. So I turned it from facing forward to sideways so that it couldn't look at me. That night, my body stopped moving. My breathing was also intermittent and painful. Then, something flowed into my right ear. It was like a rough man's voice, like a spell. I was half panicked and tried to speak. However, the more I tried to speak, the more I stopped breathing. I rolled my eyes, but I couldn't tell if they were open or not. It was pitch black and I couldn't see anything. Suddenly I heard a sharp crack, and I thought, it's broken. Then the whole room became bright. The lights were still on. I was relieved, convinced that it was just a bad dream. Feeling relieved, I looked around the room and tried to go back to sleep. But then I noticed something. The doll on the right dresser was facing forward, i.e., towards me. Panicking again, I ran into my parents' room and slept there that night. The next day at school, I told my childhood friend who lived next door. I had a scary dream last night. My childhood friend only said, "Oh," taking it half-heartedly. That day, I invited my childhood friend over to my house. When I showed my childhood friend the doll, she said, "Wow, it's a big doll," and seemed happy. "That's nice. This is the doll from your dream, right? It's cute. If you don't like it, you can give it to me." My childhood friend seemed to want to take the doll. I've gotten so many Nika dolls up until now, and so the doll was taken to her house. The next morning I looked in the mirror and was shocked. The right half of my face was covered with what looked like acne. Ew, that's gross. But there was nothing I could do. I went to school as usual. When my friend saw my face at school, she screamed, "What's that?" I pretended that I didn't know about it, so I answered, "What is it, acne?" Then she said, "Mirror, nurse's room," and gave me a small stick mirror. The acne on my face had turned into a bright red scratch. I don't remember scratching it. I rushed to the nurse's room and had it washed. The teacher said it was an inflamed pimple. I hadn't even touched it. I mentioned the doll, but it seemed to be displayed as if nothing had happened. That night I was lying in bed, and the right half of my face was extremely hot. The hair that had stuck to my neck with sweat was frizzy. I heard yelling coming from my friend's house. I don't know if it was a husband-wife fight or a parent-child fight, but it's not uncommon. It's a house where they fight all the time. "It's a fire." I jumped out of bed. The light was on again. I straight away thought it was my house. I figured it must be my brother's room next door. His room was a garbage dump, and he slept in a closet and smoked in there. Could that be why my face felt hot earlier? But then, my assumptions were completely off. It was my childhood friend's house that was in flames. My parents rushed out and told me to stay in my room, so I went to sleep, shivering. The next day, more than half of my childhood friend's house had burned down. When I went to school, I was told about the fire and asked for donations to be collected, starting the next day. My childhood friend went to school as usual, but everyone else was still a little reserved. What caused the fire? I couldn't bring myself to ask. However, my childhood friend started telling me the story herself. My dad found my doll. He yelled, "Where did you bring it?" in a very angry tone. I told him I got it from you, but he suddenly lost his temper, set it on fire and threw it to the floor. The word doll sent chills down my spine. What? So that's the cause? No way. The fire went out immediately, but the face was burned, so I just threw it away. I'm sorry. I just shook my head silently. Her father seems to be a person who gets angry easily, and he has hit things and set fires in the past. This fire was also caused by careless handling of fire. The doll in my room, the spell I heard from the right, the inflammation on the right side of my face, the hot face, the burned face of the doll. It was scary because it seemed like everything was connected. By the way, she moved out and is now attending a normal high school and is doing very well. I have become even more scared since that incident. However, it seems that she still collects Sylvanian families as a hobby. Hi, I would like to relate to you about the experiences at my workplace. My office had a fatal accident during the building process. What happened was that a crane broke and slammed into the side of the building, killing one Indian man and one Thai guy. Since my office operates with shift work, some of my colleagues saw the Indian man, but never the Thai guy. During one night shift, my colleague Daniel was smoking at the corner, away from the security camera, enjoying the view of the Western Sea. From the corner of his eye, he saw a figure. He turned and saw an Indian man looking at him. The man was drenched and looked kind of sad. Daniel was shocked because he knew there weren't any Indian guys working the night shift that day. He was paralyzed with fear, couldn't move, couldn't run, because the figure was standing at the only exit. After a while, the Indian man seemed to be talking to him, but there wasn't any vocal sound at all. After his silent speech, he turned and disappeared. Another colleague, Mark, was having his late supper at 3 a.m. in the pantry. Again, he saw the Indian man standing at a distance, looking sad as though he was trying to communicate with him. After a while, the figure also disappeared. After those incidents became the talk of the town within my office, most people did not want to work night shifts. Hence, the management scrapped night shifts until now. The latest craze in my office involves spirits apparently taking the form of normal humans, appearing to my colleagues as one of their own. Alice went to the ladies' room and saw Brenda combing her hair. They struck up a conversation. Then Brenda went into a cubicle. Alice left the toilet and went back to her workspace. Suddenly, she saw Brenda at her workstation. Alice then asked Brenda how she managed to get back faster, but Brenda replied that she had not left for the toilet the whole morning. Another colleague, Charlie, saw Alice from a distance and tried calling out to her, but Alice walked much faster and turned the corner. Charlie thought Alice had gone back to her workstation. When Charlie reached Alice's workstation, there was no one there. Charlie asked around and was told that Alice didn't come to work that day and had applied for emergency leave. What exactly is happening in this office? The unexplained incidents leave everyone in a frenzy, with a blend of fear and intrigue hanging in the atmosphere. Is it the ghosts of those who perished in the building accident? Or something else entirely?
When I was working in an office a few years ago, I had an experience that still haunts me to this day. Our office was situated in a building that was known for its eerie occurrences. Many colleagues had shared stories of seeing apparitions and hearing strange noises. but I had always been a skeptic. One evening, I was working late as I had a tight deadline to meet. The office was completely empty, and the only light was from my desk lamp. It was around 9 p.m. when I felt a sudden drop in the temperature. I just brushed it off as a draft and I continued working. But suddenly, I heard faint whispers coming from the corridor. I paused and listened carefully, but the whispers stopped. I went back to my work, but the whispers started again. This time, they were louder and more distinct. It felt like a conversation between two people, but I couldn't make out the words. Curious and slightly unnerved, I got up and I walked towards the corridor, and the whispers continued, growing louder as I approached. The corridor was dimly lit, and I could see a shadow moving at the end. My heart raced, but I convinced myself that it was just my imagination. As I reached the end of the corridor, the whispers abruptly stopped. I searched the area, but I found no one. Feeling uneasy, I decided to call it a night and then head home. As I gathered my things, I heard a soft humming sound coming from the opposite direction. My curiosity got the better of me, and I followed the sound. And to my shock, I saw a woman dressed in an old-fashioned outfit standing near the window. She was humming an unfamiliar tune and seemed oblivious to my presence. I called out to her, but she didn't respond to me. I took a step closer, and she suddenly turned to face me. Her eyes were hollow, and her face was pale and expressionless. A cold shiver ran down my spine as I realized that I was face to face with a ghost. Before I could react, she vanished into thin air. I stood there, paralyzed with fear, unable to comprehend what had just happened. That night, I left the office in a hurry, and I couldn't sleep for days. The experience made me a believer in the supernatural, and I never stayed late at the office again. What was it that I encountered that night? I may never know, but the memory of those whispers and the ghostly figure still haunts me to this day.
This incident happened when I was on maternity leave. My colleagues related this story to me on the first day I got back to work. Our office building is somewhere in Raffles Place, so I can't mention the specific location. The incident involved a Chinese maintenance worker named R. Tan, whom we all knew quite well. He was on a night shift that particular day with another Malay colleague. As part of their routine, R. Tan would go floor by floor to check on broken lights. During his rounds, he noticed a light on the 6th floor that needed repair. It was around 7 p.m. when R. Tan reached the staircase of the 6th floor. There, he saw a woman squatting with her back facing the wall, making it impossible to see her face. The corridor was dimly lit, and the surrounding silence added an eerie atmosphere. Ignoring any eerie feelings, R. Tan approached the woman and asked what she was doing there. The woman, without turning, responded in a cold, disembodied voice that sent chills down R. Tan's spine. She said that her son had been playing hide and seek in the wall and refused to come out. She mentioned, in a monotonous tone, that she had brought him to visit her office. The absurdity of her words baffled R. Tan, but he brushed it off, thinking she might be delusional or playing a prank. After her explanation, she slowly stood up, but still did not turn to face him. She demanded a cigarette. Her voice, though emotionless, seemed to resonate with an underlying threat. Confused but wanting to help, Artan handed her a cigarette. He fumbled slightly with the lighter, his hands trembling. She then asked him to light it for her. At that moment, the flame flickered to life and touched the cigarette. The woman's countenance shifted dramatically. She began to turn around, each movement slow and deliberate, as if she was savoring the moment. The dim light from the corridor cast unsettling shadows on her form. Artan's heart pounded as his eyes met hers. The face he saw was far from human. Her eyes were hollow, black voids that seemed to suck in all the light from around them. Her mouth was unnaturally wide, stretched far beyond what any human mouth should be capable of. It gaped open in a grotesque smile that exposed rows of jagged, blackened teeth. The skin on her face was pallid and appeared to be decaying, as if she had been dead for a long time. As Artan tried to process the terror before him, the woman let out a shrieking laughter that echoed through the empty floor. The sound was a cacophony of madness, filled with malice and despair. It was so piercing and unnatural that it felt like shards of glass being driven into his ears. The haunting laughter reverberated in his mind long after the sound had faded. The shock and horror were too much for Artan to bear. His vision blurred, and his legs gave out beneath him. He collapsed to the floor in a heap, still clutching the lighter. The laughter seemed to linger in the air. When Artan was found later, barely conscious, he was immediately taken to the hospital. The ordeal had left him with a severe fever and a look of pure terror etched permanently on his face. He could barely speak, and when he did, his words were incoherent. Haunted by the memory of the grotesque face he had encountered, Artan never fully recovered from the experience. The terror had taken a toll on his mental health. He resigned from his job soon after, unable to return to the place that held such memories. What exactly did Artan see that night on the 6th floor? No one knows for certain.
This happened during the last 2 years in my previous office building, located in TG Pagar area. It's a pretty new building, about 10 years old, and the last 2 years were my second time working there. My office moved out a month ago, otherwise I wouldn't be telling you this now. Nothing happened during my first stint in the building 10 years ago, but before I started working there the second time, my ex-colleagues who remained in the building told me of some eerie encounters. The funny thing is, these occurrences started after I left my previous company. Some colleagues who worked late would sometimes find the office extremely cold, and usually so since the centralized air conditioning turned off at 6 p.m. They also claimed that the office photocopier would sometimes print out blank pages on its own, despite no incoming faxes and no one near the printer. Those were their stories. Now, let's start with mine. My job requires me to work irregular hours, so I sometimes come back in the middle of the night. First, let me describe the layout of the office. It is partitioned into 2 areas, mainly the reception area and the rest of the office, separated by an 8-foot-high wall not reaching the ceiling. This means we can still hear anyone talking outside. The main door consists of 2 glass doors using a number lock. Usually, after the receptionist leaves at 6 p.m., there is no one at the front office. The receptionist's counter is covered with a glass piece. The office is on raised flooring, and it's on the highest level with 3 units. Our unit was in the center, with the other 2 being unoccupied during the last 2 years. Tenants from other units couldn't access our level, as a lift access card was required. Further, the fire access staircase was locked from the outside. Once open and closed, it would auto-lock, trapping you outside. Whenever we worked beyond 7 p.m., we sometimes heard the stationery at the receptionist counter being moved. There were sounds of stapler, clicking of the PC mouse, typing on the keyboard, or even the chair being moved. Although these sounds were a bit scary, they didn't bother us much since it was still early. On one occasion, I returned to the office around midnight to work. The office was pretty cold, even though the centralized air conditioning had been off, as I mentioned, and it wasn't raining. I needed to use the toilet after supper. To get to the toilet, I had to pass by one corridor, and as I passed, I heard someone entering the office by pressing the number lock, followed by a loud bang of the glass door against the magnetic strip. Usually at this hour, only one other colleague or I would return, and we would typically ensure that the door was closed gently to avoid cracking the glass. But I just continued to the toilet to do my business. And while in the cubicle, I suddenly heard the rubbish bin cover spinning loudly. There were only 2 cubicles, and I hadn't heard anyone enter the toilet. I called out, thinking that it may be the security guard patrolling, but no one answered me. And then, the toilet light started flickering. I quickly finished and then I left. When I returned, the office lights were off, even though I had left them on. It wasn't a power trip, as I had to turn the lights back on with the switches, and my PC was still running. Though a little scared, I continued working and I left shortly thereafter. The next day, I asked my colleague if he returned the night before. He said no, as expected, since he's the lazy type who wouldn't return late unless necessary. On another occasion, a lady colleague finished her work around 7 p.m., and after turning off all the lights, she went to the toilet. Passing by the corridor, she again heard someone entering the office with a number lock, and then followed by a loud bang. She turned back to check, hoping to scare the person. But to her horror, no one was there. It was impossible for anyone to disappear within seconds without her hearing the lift door open. She then called me on my mobile, wondering if I had returned, and I said no. She didn't dare to go back and then left. The next day, we asked around and no one admitted to returning. We were all pretty close in our small company, so I doubt anyone lied. The third encounter happened around 10 p.m. when I was the only person left in the office. Suddenly, I heard footsteps. Given the uneven raised flooring, it was odd to hear footsteps without anyone around. The fourth encounter happened weeks before our move. I was working late, around 11 p.m., when I saw a transparent figure moving around the office. It looked like an old man with spectacles and a bold top, resembling my ex-boss, who is definitely still alive. Though I was scared, I shouted at him to not disturb me, and then he vanished. On the night before our official move, I was again alone, packing up my stuff, and after packing, I went to the toilet to wash up and then came back to take the lift. As I faced my office main door, the same blurred, transparent old man stood there, waving goodbye with a disappointed look. It was as if he knew that this was my last night there. I waved back, and fortunately, the lift arrived quickly, and I left. So, those are my experiences. Till my next encounter, and farewell.
Last year, I was working at a private firm in the eastern area of Singapore as a secretary. It was a demanding job, but I had always been dedicated and aimed to complete my tasks meticulously. The office had a certain charm, with its modern design and large glass windows that offered a panoramic view of the bustling city. By day, it was filled with the hum of conversations and ringing phones, but by night, it was transformed into an eerie, silent place. One particular night, I found myself working late. The other staff members had all gone home, their desks now empty and quiet. The overhead fluorescent lights cast a stark glow over the office, creating long shadows on the walls. I had a pile of paperwork that needed to be completed before the next morning, so I remained focused at the front desk. It was around 8 p.m., and the ticking of the clock seemed louder than usual, marking every passing second in the stillness of the office. As I immersed myself in the documents, I suddenly felt a chill seeping in from underneath the table. It started as a gentle cold, but it quickly grew more intense. The odd thing was that the office itself was quite warm, almost stifling. But the air conditioning had been turned off for the night, and I was wearing a skirt that evening, and my legs felt the brunt of the cold, making me shiver involuntarily. The sensation was so out of place that it pulled me out of my concentration. Curious and slightly apprehensive, I glanced down to see what could possibly be causing the chill. To my utter shock, I saw a small, bald, naked child, resembling a 5-year-old, grinning up at me from beneath the desk. His eyes were wide and eerie, and his grin sent shivers down my spine. For a moment I was frozen in place, my mind struggling to process the surreal and terrifying image before me. On pure instinct, and perhaps the adrenaline of the moment, I did something I would have never imagined doing. I kicked the strange kid. My foot made contact, but the texture felt all wrong, almost like kicking through a dense fog or mist. The next thing I knew, I was bolting out of the office, still in my high heels, my heart pounding in my chest. I left the lights on, the door unlocked, and all my belongings behind in my frantic escape. As I stumbled into the hallway, I nearly collided with the security guard making his rounds. I must have looked a sight, breathless, pale, and shaking. Between gasps, I managed to explain what I had seen, though my words were jumbled and frantic. The guard, trying to calm me, assured me that he would check the office. He led me back to the front of the office, his baton ready in hand, while I stood nervously at the entrance, dialing my boyfriend's number with trembling fingers. The security guard entered the office cautiously, searching every nook and cranny, his footsteps echoing in the empty space. I waited anxiously, the phone pressed to my ear, listening to the rings as I prayed for someone to answer. Minutes felt like hours, and my mind raced with 1,000 questions and fears. What if the child, or whatever it was, showed up again? What if it was some kind of spirit or ghost? The very thought made my skin crawl. Finally, the guard re-emerged, shaking his head. He found nothing. No sign of the child. No indication that anyone or anything had been there. He tried to reassure me, suggesting that maybe I was just tired and my mind had played tricks on me. But I knew what I had seen, and there was no mistaking the unnatural chill or the malevolent grin of that child. The experience had shaken me to the core. That night, as I lay in bed, my mind replayed the incident over and over. Sleep eluded me. Each creak of my apartment added to my anxiety. I couldn't fathom returning to that office, not after what I had witnessed. The next day, With my decision made, I handed in my resignation without notice. My boss was baffled, but I couldn't bring myself to explain the real reason. What was it I saw that night? Was it really a 5-year-old kid? This incident occurred at a higher education institute in Kuala Lumpur. Sarah had recently been admitted and was excited. It was her first time living away from home. She looked forward to registration day since receiving her acceptance letter. With her baggage, Sarah arrived and was assigned a room on the top floor of the hostel. As she searched for her room, she wondered about her roommate. Excited and curious, she eventually found the room. Trying to open the door, she found it locked. Disappointed, she used her keys and entered to see her roommate sleeping inside. Sarah left her alone and started unpacking. Eventually, her roommate, who introduced herself as Ina, woke up. Ina was pleasant, with shoulder-length hair and a fair complexion. They got along well for the rest of the semester. However, Ina only appeared after dusk and slept very little. To Sarah, Ina must have a busy social life. Everything was fine until one night. It was a full moon and the sky was clear. The hostel was quiet as it was late. Around 3 a.m., Sarah decided to sleep. She asked Ina to switch off the room light and turn on her reading lamp. Without getting up, the room light switched off and Ina's reading lamp turned on. Sarah felt strange but didn't question it. She thought she was too tired to notice Ina moving. As she looked to say goodnight, she realized Ina was transparent. Sarah felt uneasy, covered herself with her blanket and fell asleep. The next day, Sarah thought about the incident and felt uneasy. She remembered how nobody knew about Ina and how Ina always appeared after dusk and disappeared by dawn. Sarah went to the registrar's office to find information about Ina. Initially, the clerk refused, but later revealed that Sarah wasn't supposed to have a roommate. Sarah was afraid to return to her room that night. She stayed with friends for the next few nights and only went back during the day to collect her belongings. She applied for a room change and was lucky to get it. The identity of Ina remained a mystery. Despite being a pleasant roommate, some truths might be better left unknown. I heard this story from my soccer coach. Before the college was built, the cemetery had to be cleared, but some bodies were left behind, including under the soccer pitch. Every time it rained, crows would fly low over the pitch, even if we were training. Our coach claimed the crows landed where bodies were buried, but we didn't believe him. College camps ended early, around 9 or 10 p.m., due to disturbances in the halls when students played late-night games. A tunnel connected the hall's second story to the first, but it was dark, and something felt like it was lurking inside. A girl reportedly took her life in the changing room near the hall. The lights often went out there, and girls complained about seeing faces in the mirrors. The college eventually turned the girls' changing room into the boys' changing room, much to our frustration. We preferred changing on open ground rather than in that creepy room. One of the lecture theatres, I can't say which one, was always colder than the other three and rumoured to be haunted by a student who took their own life there. Students staying overnight for studying or camping reported seeing a pale green face in the control room. Some even felt their shoulders tapped by something unseen. These incidents really scared them. Students staying late often sat in remote places near the science labs. The stretch of road to the labs was dark, and some students saw white figures flying through the air. They ran to the study corner, leaving their bags and notes behind. There were also stories of hauntings in the containers at the back of the college near the science labs. During my uni days, I lived in a hostel that was apparently haunted. I'd heard stories but didn't believe them because I had to live there. One story was about a student who had hung himself on the 3rd floor. One night my roommate and I were lying in bed and heard a weird noise above us. It sounded exactly like someone walking up and down the 3rd floor corridor. I got up and checked the other rooms to make sure no students were responsible, but they were all fast asleep. We yelled for the night security guard, who came upstairs and heard it too. His advice? Just ignore it. So we sat there, listening to the footsteps. Then my roommate had an idea. Tape it. We sat with the recorder, wondering what was happening. Then my roommate said, "Ever heard the saying, 'Don't cry over spilt milk'?" "Yes," I replied. "Here's a new one. Don't cry over hanged men." With those words, the ceiling above us began pounding loudly. We shrieked in fear, and the security guard came running upstairs. We spent the rest of the night huddling on the common room sofa. The next day we played the tape for the staff, and it was agreed that the house was indeed freaky. Despite that, I lived there for another year. The exact place and time remain unknown, but the school was in Clementi. I graduated in July 2001. But before leaving, I learned the true stories from the teachers. Years back, the teacher's room was on the ground floor, with a back staircase for easy access to classes. However, the staircase was dark and eerie, considered haunted. Teachers working late often experienced disturbances. One ex-teacher stayed late to mark papers and update records in the computer. When she paused typing, she heard typing from the keyboard next to her, as if someone was typing exactly what she had typed, despite there being no one else there. She ignored it initially, but got scared as it continued. Eventually she packed her bags and left quickly. I was told that a teacher had taken her life on the back staircase due to stress. Now, the teacher's room is placed on the 3rd floor at the far end of the school. Perhaps the teacher who took her life wanted to help with all the work after all. This incident happened in Temasek Poly IT building level 5 at the locker area. I kept my soccer ball in my locker and had soccer matches every Wednesday from 2 p.m. into the late evenings, usually finishing around 8 p.m. One day, after a match ended at 8 p.m., I intended to keep my soccer ball in the locker. When I went up to level 5, it was silent and creepy. The lights were off and every footstep echoed. There were 2 exits in the locker area, one leading to the elevator, the other to the emergency exit. I was alone, as my friends were too lazy to follow. As I walked towards the locker area, I felt my hairs stand up, and a sudden cold breeze overwhelmed me. I tried to be quick, running to my locker and attempting to open the lock, but I kept fumbling due to my nerves. Suddenly, out of the corner of my eye, I noticed someone at the emergency exit door. It was rare for anyone to use that door, especially at this time. Trying not to imagine the worst, I turned around to see whether it was a ghost or an old cleaner. It was just the cleaner. I was so relieved. "Hi, boy. Not going back yet?" shouted the cleaner. just as I was about to respond, he disappeared into thin air. The place became cold, and a chilly breeze swept through. I ran out and never went back alone again. I used to live in a dorm while in college in the Philippines. This dorm is L-shaped and has 2 wings. Where the 2 wings intersect is a study hall, which has 2 doors leading to each wing. One door leads to a long hallway with a bathroom just a few feet away. The hall has AC, so the windows are shut all the time. One late night, my roommate and I were in the study hall, studying. We were the only residents awake. The rest were either fast asleep or preferred staying in their rooms. We were eating cup noodles when I felt my bladder kick in. I excused myself and went to the bathroom down the hall. When I came out, I saw my roommate standing outside the bathroom door in the hallway, looking really scared. "I heard something," she said. "It sounded like a man clearing his throat." "Where?" I asked, not fully believing her. "In the study hall." We ended up studying in our rooms that night. I was still skeptical, telling her it was probably just a toilet flush she heard. About a week later, I was in the study hall again, this time with a dorm mate who was helping me with my math. I had all my stuff spread out on the table. We were the only ones in the study hall, which was eerily quiet around 3 a.m. Feeling bad about keeping her up so late, I told her to go to bed and thanked her. She left, and I was alone, gathering my things to return to my room. Suddenly, I heard the unmistakable sound of a man's throat clearing. I froze, trying to figure out where the sound came from. That did it for me. I quickly gathered my stuff and yelled out a string of swear words to scare off whatever it was. I've been told swearing makes spirits leave you alone. I ran to my room. A girl in my class, who claims to be a bit psychic, came up to me one day and said, "In your dorm, where you study, there's a man there." I've never told her about the throat clearing incident, and she had never seen my dorm. Her words freaked me out. Since then, I've never studied there, alone. First, let me get the important details out of the way before I talk about my experience at this international school. The school building, from what I heard, is quite old and has had several past owners who likely used it for different purposes. The events occurred in December 2016 in a Global Perspectives classroom on the 3rd floor. I was in year 10 at the time. Being the introvert that I was, I sat by myself in a secluded corner of the class. The nearest person was about 2 to 3 meters to my left, and I sat directly next to a wall on my right. This was the first time I experienced true supernatural activity, although it wasn't the last, as other minor strange incidents occurred in this school the following year. Back then, I was a Christian and was on the fence about the existence of ghosts. I feel this is important to note. Now that we have that out of the way, here is what happened. During the first 40 to 50 minutes of Global Perspectives, things were as mundane as ever. We were working on a crucial project, and it was dull. I was ahead of the class and playing music on my earphones. Suddenly, things got strange. I felt tingles in my neck, which intensified, and before I knew it, my entire body was paralyzed. I was terrified beyond words for no apparent reason, and my throat felt like I was choking. My heart pounded. I had no idea what was happening because I'd never felt like this before. However, this isn't the strangest part. While I was in this uncomfortable state, I saw a reflection of an unidentifiable, faceless, shadowy figure gliding past me from left to right, thanks to my computer screen. As this happened, I felt a cold breeze brush past, as if someone was hastily walking by. After a few seconds, my paralysis, terror, and choking feeling ended abruptly, and I returned to normal. I had many questions about what had just happened. I looked around the classroom, but saw no one behind or near me. I knew whoever glided past couldn't have been the closest classmate, who sat on my left while that thing was going right. It didn't move like a human, and its legs and other body parts didn't appear to move as it glided. Remember the wall directly to my right? From my computer screen, it looked like the figure was going to run into it, but I didn't hear anyone hit the wall. My music wasn't loud enough to block such a noise. Nobody in the classroom was standing, and no one was behind or near me. I've had other odd instances, like coins of foreign currency materializing out of nowhere, but nothing compares to what happened during that GP class in 2016. Even though it isn't my business, I sometimes wonder where that thing was heading back then, if it's still in the school, and if not, where is it now? The old Gan Eng Seng School used to be at Spottiswoode Park, but moved to Tiong Bahru this year. The old site was haunted, especially the 4th level and the technical block. My seniors shared many stories from their camping experiences, and I had some personal ones too. Last year, while looking for Jay, who had done poorly on her exam and might do something foolish, my friend and I went to the technical block's 1st floor toilet. Entering, we heard someone sobbing in the first cubicle. Assuming it was Jay, we called out to her, but there was no reply. I cautiously opened the door, finding no one inside. We were scared and decided to leave. As we walked out, the sobbing resumed, but the other cubicles were empty. A senior shared his experience during a school camp. While sleeping in a 4th floor classroom, which is dangerous after 6 p.m. due to unclean things, they were told not to stare at the ceiling fans to avoid seeing terrible things. While trying to sleep, my senior saw a white figure float across the classroom and disappear. He was scared stiff and shut his eyes. The next morning, he told his NCOs, who said he was lucky to see only a white figure. Years ago, they saw a head hanging from the fan, dripping blood. Another senior recounted a cross-country event at Mkrichi Res. No one should have been in school, but he had to return for something. In the canteen's toilet, he heard sneezing, the toilet flushing, and the door banging, even though he was alone. Walking towards the ECA room, he saw an old lady cleaner on the central staircase. It was 5 a.m., which seemed strange. After a few blinks, she was gone. This cleaner died over 20 years ago and haunted the school, seen sweeping the whole floor or walking around the ECA rooms, foyer, and 4th floor. The 4th floor girls' toilet is also creepy, even during the day, with its distinctive pink decor. Rumor has it, a girl gave birth there, and the baby died. Months later, the girl hung herself in the same toilet. Both the girl and her baby reportedly haunt the toilet. Once, when I entered with a friend, I heard a baby crying, but saw nothing. As we left, I heard a girl talking in the last cubicle. No one was inside, but there were crying sounds. Avoid the 4th level after 6 p.m. The school is now Bukit Merah Secondary School. In 1999, I was at an annual camp with my ECA in a secondary school in Toa Payoh. Like any old school, it was filled with rumors and ghost stories, particularly in toilets and classrooms. We had just finished the campfire on the last night of the 3-day, 2-night camp. Campers conducted sentry duties as usual, and as instructors, we had to prowl the area to ensure no unwanted persons were around. I was skeptical about ghosts in schools, eager to prove that there was nothing paranormal. I gathered 4 instructors, and we decided to explore everywhere, regardless of how dark or sensitive the location. First, we prowled the ground floor, checking fences, classroom areas, and surroundings. We looked through classrooms with open windows and checked every tree. We reached a small hut behind the PE building and found the metal door closed. To ensure no one was inside, I used a stick to slowly push the door open, half expecting to see something. The door creaked open to reveal only cleaning equipment. Smiling at our stillness, we walked away, only to hear the door close again. We were shocked, but told ourselves it was the hinges, not daring to check again. We then checked the 2nd and 3rd floors until we reached the 4th floor toilet, a notorious ghost haunt. Every year, campers reported seeing something hanging along the corridors outside it. We checked both the gents and ladies, finding nothing. After our prowling, we sat around the campfire, discussing the apparent lack of paranormal activity. Suddenly, the only girl instructor pointed out she had seen someone looking at us from the back of a 1st floor classroom while we were on the ground level. She hadn't told us because she often had bad experiences with these things and didn't want anything bad to happen then. I immediately took one instructor and returned to the classroom. On the way, I felt the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end, but I didn't alert my partner. We found nothing in the classroom and returned to the campfire. I asked my partner if he had felt anything. To my amazement, he described the same experience at the exact location. I hadn't mentioned my experiences to avoid influencing his perception. Friends who were old students assured me the spirits were friendly and wouldn't bother us if we didn't disturb them. To be safe, we turned on the corridor lights where we had felt the presence. This time we felt nothing. Friends told me that the spirit had gone away and we should maintain the area's calmness. The rest of the night was peaceful, with no campers reporting sightings. This is not really a story, but a personal account from my secondary school years when I was in NPCC, National Police Cadet Corps. We were supposed to have a camp the next day, which was a Friday. My squad mates and I were very close to our cadet inspectors, CIs, and we came up with a crazy idea to stay overnight in the school. We all met at around 10 p.m. and headed to our school. After negotiating with the security guards and assuring them that we wouldn't cause any trouble, they allowed us to stay in the school's foyer. We bunked inside the NPCC store and began our ghost talks. Our CIs lit a hurricane lamp and started sharing ghost stories. I didn't like the idea of using the hurricane lamps because they had been taken from nearby funerals. According to some religions, these lamps are supposed to guide spirits on their path. Halfway through the stories, I noticed a figure flash across the window pane of the door. I swore I saw something and became very quiet. Some of my squad mates noticed my strange behavior and asked if I saw something. I told them about the figure and realized I wasn't alone. Those near the door noticed the figure too. After the story session ended, we called it a day and decided to sleep. Since the store was very small, I chose to sleep outside where it was more comfortable. It was a Thursday night, and I hoped I wouldn't see anything strange, as Thursday night is known for strange happenings and is called the Devil's Night by some people. Late into the night, past midnight, I couldn't sleep but was glad I hadn't seen anything. At 2 a.m., I heard thunder roaring and saw that the sky was red, indicating a heavy rain. I sat on a chair, looking around the school until the rain began. Something caught my eye on the second floor near the staff room. A figure was moving slowly from the door towards a staircase leading to the foyer. I was scared stiff and hoped to wake up my squad mate, but they were all sound asleep. The figure appeared slowly from the corner of the wall. I went inside the store and grabbed a beret with the Singapore crest, as it was supposed to be blessed. Being in a Catholic school, I started praying, hoping the figure would go away. I eventually fell asleep and was glad nothing happened. The next day I told my squad mates about what happened. Everyone laughed, except for those who had also seen the figure during the night. Have you ever imagined ghosts eating salt? Well, there are tales of people trying to make quick bucks by selling salt to spirits in cemeteries at night. But to walk out alive, there are 2 important rules. First, you must never look up to see them. Second, you must not run out of the cemetery before dawn breaks. It is believed that if you can observe these 2 rules, then the hell notes they will pay you for the salt will turn into real money by daybreak. I personally have never come across anybody who tried it, but while doing mission training in a cemetery during my army days, I've seen people going to some Muslim cemetery at 3 a.m. I couldn't be sure what they were up to though. Anyway, for those who are interested, this is the correct procedure I heard. Go to a cemetery wearing a jacket with a hood. Bring a lot of mahjong paper to spread over the floor. And don't forget the salt wrapped in packets. Soon, hands will appear in front of your face asking for salt. You pass it to them, and they will give you money. At this point, never look up. When the sun rises, pack up your things and leave, and never look back. Now, the question is, why do ghosts need so much salt? Well, according to experts, spirits need salt to look better after they die, because their bodies begin to decay. Salt helps them maintain their personal hygiene, just like we need water to clean up. Another important thing is that your supply of salt must never run out. So get a few baskets if possible, and sit there doing nothing but looking at it. So, no matter what happens, you can only look at the basket. According to sources, each hell note they will give you will turn into $50, and you have to spend it within a week. Good luck. I'm going to share a story with you that I heard personally from my retired uncle, who used to be a grave digger at a Muslim cemetery. But try reading this story alone at midnight. My uncle used to work at the Muslim cemetery by digging holes during his prime years. He is a tall and big fellow, but he does not have any proper education, which, as a result, made him end up with such a vocation. It is the most peaceful and non-stressful job, he said. However, he added that the beginning was very tough, and it takes a strong, brave and clean, pure heart with lots of faith to endure the initial stages. When he started the job about 40 years ago, he had to dig about 10 holes per day on average under close supervision. And sometimes, there were more holes needed to be dug, depending on the death rates. Then, there was this memorable night where he had to work overtime due to unfinished digging. There were a few diggers working that night, but they were not working in close proximity to each other. The diggers actually preferred to work the graveyard shift, as it was cooler at night and the soil was softer to dig. They claimed anyway. As an apprentice, My uncle was accompanied by his supervisor for the initial weeks, after which he would be left alone to dig independently. His supervisor also cautioned him many times in a few things such as, do not utter a single word if he sees, hears, smells, or feels something unpleasant, but recite the Quran instead, or say the prayers. My uncle wondered how disastrous the situation could be. Then the moment came. He was digging a hole when he heard voices from the filled graves beside the empty ones, about a few meters away from where he was stationed. He ignored it, remembering his superior's warning. Then he heard it again and again. He kept hearing voices till he felt so curious to check it out. Some of the voices he heard were very sorrowful and mournful, while some were screaming in pain. My uncle recited his prayers quietly in his heart and kept digging. Then, when he took a momentary rest after digging 2 holes, he turned his face back towards the plot of land which had already been occupied. He then saw, with his own eyes, something that he had never imagined before in his life. A few human figures in loose clothing gliding from one tombstone to another. Some sitting and crying sorrowfully, while some seemed to be standing without a single movement, staring at my uncle. My uncle rubbed his eyes again to confirm, as it had been quite misty that night. Then my uncle's legs started to tremble and shake. Then suddenly his supervisor touched his shoulder and signaled him to ignore those things and keep digging. Then this time it was worse. While he was digging the 3rd hole, something flew into the first empty hole that had been dug by my uncle. A woman's voice was then heard in that hole. My uncle did not dare to look inside that hole, but he and his supervisor heard that woman's voice clearly, crying and asking for help, wanting to be released from the misery and pain that she had faced. Then my uncle's supervisor quickly asked my uncle to leave that place and to dig in another area for the time being. I think I'd better stop my story here, as my imagination starts to get over me and my family are already sleeping at this moment. This story happened to me. It was primary 6 school camping at our school in Bedok, near my house. I heard many stories about that school. One of them is that the school was built on a Japanese cemetery, and that is true. One night when we were asleep, I wanted to go to the toilet, but none of my friends were awake. So I went to the toilet by myself. I went to the toilet near the canteen. When I got there, I saw many people lining up. When I turned around to stretch my body and looked back again, there was nobody. So I went to the toilet quickly. When I got back to the hall, I was shocked to see that all my friends were snoring. I quickly shut my eyes and went to sleep. The next morning, I asked my friends if they went to the toilet last night, and all of them answered no. In the evening, I was playing soccer in the field. The ball went out of the field, so I went to get it. As I was retrieving the ball, I saw a man sitting up in a tree with a long sword. I knew it was Japanese, because he wore clothes exactly like during the Japanese occupation. On the spot, I fainted. The next thing I knew, I was at home. From that time onwards, I did not go there for any camping. Now, the school is abandoned. For those who are faint-hearted, please don't read this. This is a story about a soldier doing sentry duty at night at Lim Chu Kang. Lim Chu Kang is a cemetery area, a forested region, and a live firing area used by the Singapore Armed Forces, SAF, the Army of Singapore. The story begins here. Everything is written in his own words and is based on real-life encounters. Only God knows it. First up, it was the weekend and I had to do guard duty at the 2nd Battalion Singapore Guards Unit, located remotely at Lim Chu Kang, one of the last few unurbanized areas in Singapore. There were, if I remember correctly, 14 of us on duty that day. 2 NCOs, 6 sentry guards, and 6 prowlers. There were 2 sentry points and an ammo dump to guard. I was assigned to guard the main gate. I considered myself lucky because the NCO post was just 50 meters behind me. Once in a while they would come out to smoke and keep me company. I'm not easily frightened. In fact, I enjoy being in the open foggy night like this one. The whole mood was mystifying. There was almost a full moon, the sound of crickets, the hooting of owls, and a smooth cold wind. I was savoring the serenity when I heard a soft wail. My back was facing the gate, and it was from there that the wailing was emanating, so I turned. There was nothing. I looked toward the NCOs. They were watching TV and wouldn't likely have heard anything. I thought nothing of it until I heard it again. So I went to the gate and looked out. To the left, right, and into the distance. The only thing I saw were trees and a faint light some distance away. There was a house. I doubted the wailing was coming from there because the house was too far. I must admit, despite the fear, it was exciting and a little eerie. I felt goosebumps all over my body. It was the first time I had felt such a chill wash over me. As I turned to walk away from the gate, I heard it again. The wailing. This time it sounded close, right behind me. I froze in place. The wailing was beginning to really freak me out. I turned to look at the NCOs, but they were too engrossed in their television. I could see something from the corner of my eye. I turned and, dear God, it was real. I was staring at something I had only heard from other people. It was horrible. A floating green face with entrails hanging and blood dripping from this. This is no lie. I couldn't control my bladder, and I confess, I released. I stood there for what seemed like an eternity. I remember nearly coming to tears, wanting to scream but couldn't. The thing was looking at me with so much satisfaction. Thank God one of the NCOs called my name. He had noticed that I was not at my usual spot and thought something was amiss. He was absolutely right. After I heard his call, I remember feeling so relieved that I cried and nearly passed out. I was taken to the medical center and spent the night there. To this day, I shiver when I hear a wail, even in movies. Only God knows it. May peace be upon you. What I'm about to tell you is based on my true experience. In the past, I used to see things such as ghosts. Maybe spirit is a better word, but not anymore. It all started after I watched a movie with my sister at Lot 1 at 11 p.m. As we were walking, my sister wanted to go to the toilet and decided to take a shortcut on the way back to my auntie's house. While walking, we started to sing happily. But halfway, when we were about to walk past a car park, the shortcut way, I suddenly felt cold, and the hair on my neck seemed to be standing up. When that strange feeling came, I started to sing softer and softer. I was quiet for a long time when I finally couldn't bear it any longer and asked my sister whether she felt the same way. She told me that she too felt as if someone was following us all along. and we started to pray hard. My sister decided to wait a while under my auntie's block, just to let the thing go away. As we were waiting, praying, we suddenly heard a trolley coming out from the lift. Without waiting any longer, my sister quickly ran into the next lift as it suddenly opened, and she really needed to go to the toilet. When we reached the 7th floor, my sister saw that my auntie's door was wide open. She just dashed inside and went to the toilet, leaving me behind as I walked a bit slower. I was walking towards the door when I heard and saw a white figure trying to climb up the stairs, and I ran inside straight away. I saw my auntie and asked her who didn't lock the door, and she told me that it was my grandma. I told her everything, and she asked me to close the door, but I was scared. She told me that it was my grandma who pushed the trolley because she wanted to take old newspapers to sell them. That's not my first time seeing things in CCK, my aunt's place, but I've seen a lot of things, especially at the car park when walking at night and at the playground nearby. Whenever we passed by that area, shadows seemed to dance around the periphery of our vision. Sometimes, while at the playground, you could hear giggles or whispers coming from nowhere, as if unseen children were playing hide and seek. The chilling sensation and the inexplicable unease, they all pointed to an unseen world just brushing against ours. By the way, thanks to God, I can't see things anymore after drinking some prayed water. So to the readers who read this, especially those living at CCK, just be careful during the night, as maybe it's near the CCK cemetery. It was 6:15 p.m. in early 1996. The location, Chua Chung Kang Muslim Cemetery, Pusara Aman 1. Though I realized that it was quite late to be there, my main priority was to pay respects to my deceased grandparents and close friend. The place was gloomy as I stepped out of Service 172 and walked into the cemetery. The stonemasons had already started packing up, finishing for the day's engravings of tombstones. I reached my grandmother's graveside and started reciting some prayers for her while cleaning up the weeds off the burial ground. I left 10 minutes later and walked deeper into the cemetery grounds 5 minutes away to visit my deceased grandfather and close friend. I paid my respects and recited prayers for them. By then, it was already 6:45 p.m. The sun was setting into the horizon, not a soul around, and the dusk made the eerie glow from the tombstones stand out in the setting sun rays. Perfect for a photograph. Usually it would take approximately 15 minutes of brisk walking from there to the first cemetery bus stop. I did not reach the main road until 8 p.m. A full hour and 15 minutes of an unplanned journey. As I walked down Cemetery Path 12, I was drawn by the sorrowful sight of the tombstones, wondering when my time would come. I came upon a big tombstone, engraved with the name Pak Zuba Said, the composer of Majula Singapura, the country's national anthem, who passed away in 1987. I did not realize that I had wandered away from my usual path, deeper into the cemetery grounds. Soon, I saw tombstones everywhere. The path had gradually disappeared from sight. I tried to find my way back, but to no avail. There were no street lamps in the cemetery. Who there needs street lamps anyway? So I had to grope my way around, tripping over small drains. My eyes seemed to be drawn to a particular tombstone. The date, 27th of November, 1983, the birth date of my younger sibling. I walked on and stumbled upon another tombstone 5 minutes away. It bore the date of another younger sibling, February 19th, 1978. Further on, I found June 19th, 1977, the birth date of my girlfriend. Why is this happening to me? I'm not prepared for all of this. I walked on, trying to find my way out of the various tombstones. I found my way to Muslim Cemetery Path 3. That's when I saw 10th September 1974 on a tombstone. My birth date. I'm seeing someone who died on the day I was born. It was an old tombstone with years of aging and engraved stone. Then I saw lights further up. It was the lights from the cemetery mosque. I walked briskly to the mosque and performed my prayers. It was already 8 p.m. by then. No one was around. I took my ablution and performed my evening prayers. As I looked on, I saw the eerie glow form on the tombstones in the background as a warning of this unforgettable journey. There seemed to be a hidden message somewhere within. What was it? One day my cousin and I went out together. We were enjoying ourselves so much that we did not notice it was almost time to go home. It was late at night, so my cousin decided to stay at my house. We decided to take a shortcut home and had to go through the graveyard. We were walking and talking when my cousin suddenly suggested we play a game to see who can copy the most tombs. You know, the name and details in 5 minutes. Thinking that only 5 minutes would do no harm, I played too. After 5 minutes, I went to find him. He was kissing the tomb of a beautiful girl. Then, he took the girl's picture and brought it home. From that day onwards, he locked himself up in the room, and one day he started talking like a girl. We were all very afraid and thought that he was just sick. That's why his voice changed. Then one night, I went to his room and found him. He was sitting there, talking to himself in a girly voice. He didn't seem to know that I was there. Then, I saw the picture of the girl. I went to pick it up, but then he started shouting to put his picture down a number of times, and his face changed. He changed to the beautiful girl in the picture. Only then did I know that my cousin had been possessed. I asked the girl to leave him, but she said no way. He destroyed my tomb. He took my picture away, she said. I asked, what do you want before you can leave him? I want you to paste my picture back, now, she replied. I took the picture and rushed to the graveyard. I pasted the picture back and rushed home. The girl and my cousin were not there. I went back to the graveyard. There, I saw the girl and my cousin waving to me. I ran to the girl's grave, and there, I saw another tomb for my cousin. Hospitals are often at the top of the list of places where spooky stories are treated with respect. The main reason for this is that hospitals are places where people die almost every other day. During the SARS period, a friend of mine was working in a ward that harbored all the confirmed cases, which they referred to as the probable. She said strange occurrences, like dark shadows or feeling of presence, became the norm. Personally, I've always felt spooked looking at those lonely corridors with dark rooms that resemble storerooms or something equally eerie if you were to look inside. I heard that one good indication of their presence is when things get misplaced or disappear. only to reappear in unlikely locations. I've heard cleaners talk about meeting rooms being completely messed up, even though they hadn't been used for a while and had been locked all the time. One of my friends is a nurse who works the night shift. Night nurses have to make their rounds every couple of hours to ensure everything is okay. In her hospital, it was famously reported that on a certain level, at a specific corner, when walking along the corridor, a faint Buddhist chanting would fill the air. There were also stories about call bells being sounded repeatedly, even though the bed wasn't occupied. Personally, I admire the courage of those nurses who have to face the unknown in the wee hours. Do you have the same courage as them? This story I'm about to narrate is an incident that occurred to me. I am a staff member at National University Hospital in Singapore. As many of us know, there is a linkway that connects the main building and Kent Ridge Wing. This linkway is located on level 2. The level 2 linkway is used for moving patients, and this is how everything started. It was a weekend. The time was 5:15 p.m. I was instructed to complete a task that was assigned to me by my controller. I had to dispatch 14 case notes. Therefore, I went to the medical record office located at Kent Ridge Wing. I was pushing the trolley towards the linkway. Suddenly, the door at lift lobby 8 opened and closed several times. I sensed that something was wrong. As I pushed the trolley faster, I could hear a lot of footsteps around me. However, I was the only person at that level. I closed my eyes for several seconds. As I took small steps towards the entrance of the main building, I saw a white figure moving across the staircase towards the histopathology lab. The next thing I knew, I was dumbstruck. I called my controller and asked her to assign the job to another porter. I left the trolley outside the Department of Diagnostic Imaging. The following week, I decided to investigate the hospital. That's when my colleague told me that during the 90s, the histopathology lab used to be a place where they did post-mortem work. They used a cadaver's body parts for research and experiments. However, they demolished the area and converted it into a histopathology lab. It is said that the spirit is lurking in that area and has been there for a very, very long time, trying to find its body that was once used for medical experiments. Some time back, I was injured while playing soccer, and my hamstring was practically torn apart. As a result, I was admitted to a hospital. In my ward, there were 6 beds, 3 in each of the 2 rows. I was in one of the middle beds, so there was a bed on each side of me. The bed on the left was empty, and the other was occupied by a Caucasian man. On the first night, I remember sleeping at around 10 p.m. after my girlfriend left. It was about midnight when I suddenly woke up and noticed a Malay guy, my age, lying in the bed that used to be empty. I was quite surprised since I knew no one would typically be admitted to a hospital in the middle of the night, except for emergency cases, and my ward was certainly not meant for emergencies. However, being the rational person I am, I didn't think of anything supernatural. Instead, I assumed maybe he wasn't satisfied with the bed he was in before and wanted to transfer to this one. I thought to myself, finally, in a ward of old men, I've got someone to chat with tomorrow, since he was my age and race. So feeling happy, I went back to sleep. The next morning, I found that the bed was empty. I asked a nurse who the person sleeping next to me was the previous night, and guess what? She said no one had been there. I could hardly believe it. The Caucasian man next to me, who had been quiet all along, said that just a day before I came, a Malay guy had been in that bed next to mine because of a bike accident, and that he died that very day. To this day, I don't know what to make of it. I reassure myself that it was just pure coincidence, that I was dreaming about a Malay guy in the bed next to mine. But somehow, it just can't be. It begins with curiosity. After all, so many tales have been spoken about the old Changi hospital. I had gone there twice. During the first trip, together with my cousins, we saw nothing but a lot of curious people like us. In fact, the crowd was so overwhelming that 2 SAF soldiers came and asked the crowd to vacate the premises, as it was supposed to be a restricted area. However, I was not satisfied with the first trip. After a couple of months, I decided to check out the place again. This time I asked my friend to come along. Since there were only 2 of us, we decided to have our supper in Changi village before heading to the spot. After supper, we drove to the spot. I began to share with him about the crowds on my last trip. Half expecting the crowds, I turned into the gentle slope road, leading us to Old Changi Hospital. As the road was not well lit, I decided to turn on the high beam. We saw a road sweeper in the distance. It was an old man, sweeping by the side of the road. Interestingly, he did not react to our headlights. He kept his head down all the while. When we reached the dead end, which is the old hospital emergency department, it was dark and quiet. There was not a single soul. I was kind of surprised. Thinking that it was not wise to venture out, we decided to leave. As we turned back to the only road that would lead us back to the main road, we saw the old man again. As usual, he did not seem bothered by our presence and the car's high beam. My friend and I jokingly said, maybe we should check him out to see if he was human or a ghost. But we lacked the courage to stop the car and check him out. When we were on the well-lit main road, a couple of questions came to mind. One, why would an old man sweep the road at this hour, around 10:30 p.m., on a dark stretch of road without any street lamps? 2, can a normal person see under those conditions? And 3, normally, a cleaner wears a luminous reflective vest, but he wore none. This incident occurred last year during my friend's final night at SGH. It's a true story that still sends shivers down my spine. Around 11 p.m., she was supposed to restock some supplies for the next day, so she took a trolley with her. While collecting the items, she noticed a woman in black with blonde hair waving at her. Surprised, since there were no visitors allowed at that time, she decided to walk away. Upon returning to the nursery, the staff nurse remarked on how pale she looked, but my friend just dismissed it. At 2 a.m., the staff nurse asked her to retrieve 2 babies from rooms 21 and 17. As she approached, she saw the same blonde woman standing at the counter, conversing with the staff nurse. Shocked but composed, she proceeded to the rooms, collected the babies, and noticed the blonde woman following her. Increasing her pace, she swiftly returned to the nursery. Once inside, the blonde woman smiled at her and walked away within minutes. Curiously, my friend asked the staff nurse about the woman, only to learn that she claimed to have visited her sister in room 13 and had asked for directions to the restroom. This news floored my friend, as there was no one in room 13. Intrigued and uneasy, they all decided to check the restroom. Upon entering, they discovered a locked cubicle and waited outside. When they re-entered, they found a pool of blood at the sink and the eerie smile of the blonde woman behind them. I remember this incident vividly despite it happening when I was still a kid. In fact, most of my memories relating back to my childhood are fuzzy, and I can't remember much about it, such as my primary school days. I was admitted to KK Hospital and was warded in one of those wards with animals painted on the walls. Beside me was a child who was hooked up to several tubes and was always looking towards my side. Regrettably, I would often draw the curtains to hide myself away from others, including her. This is an action that I regret to this day, seeing as how that action of mine possibly denied her the chance of seeing the outside world. I was young and didn't really know what was actually going on with me, except that it was really serious. I was suffering from asthma then and was suspected to have a hole in the heart. My parents were extremely worried and would often take turns staying in the hospital to be by my side. It so happened one night that I suffered from an asthma attack, and luckily I survived that ordeal. However, what I remember most from that ordeal is not the effect it had on my body, but rather the dreamlike sequence I had. In my dream then, I was at the lobby of the hospital, the same place I remembered from the years when I was warded. People would often handle their administrative tasks or collect their medicine from there, if I'm not wrong. In my dream, I was around that area and wandering around when I chanced upon a person in a wheelchair. That person in the wheelchair was beckoning me to go over to him. He was wearing a hood over his face, and I couldn't make out his face. All I knew was that he was draped in a navy blue overall with a hood as well. Thinking back, I guess I was lucky that I rejected his advance and walked away, as the incident that stood out the most for me in this dream was that I actually saw the initials indicated on one side of the wheelchair. S-A-T-A-N. God knows what would have happened if I had have walked towards that figure in my dreams back then. This is a true story. It gave me the creeps too. My aunt from Kuala Lumpur, who works in a maternity hospital, shared it with me. She usually works night shifts, and as we all know, hospitals can be pretty spooky at night. Lots of things happen that only some people notice. One normal working night, my aunt reached her ward on time and was at her desk, doing her usual duties. Then, she was asked to send some files up to the 5th floor for immediate action. Not knowing what awaited her, she went to the 5th floor alone by lift. At the 3rd floor, the lift opened and a child came running in, playing and laughing like little kids do. My aunt got off at the 5th floor and did her job. After she was done, she took the lift back down. It was only when she was back with her friends that it hit her. What was a young child doing on the 3rd floor, which is a nursery or daycare area, in the middle of the night? That realization gave her goosebumps. After that day, she never went alone. In fact, all the nurses always go in pairs in the lifts. Scary, huh? P.S. My aunt became ill the next day for several days with a high fever for no particular reason. Apparently, it's said that nurses wear their caps for protection, especially those working at night, because they won't be disturbed if they wear them. That's what I've heard. This is a true story that was related to me by a colleague of mine, who is now working at the same company as I am. As she does not wish to discuss the matter anymore, I hereby wish to express her fear to all, and to hope that everyone will take this as a lesson and stop visiting these places. I believe that we all share the same opinion about the name Old Changi Hospital, that the place is haunted. I believe that the name has risen in popularity over the years because many different people have different stories to relate about their past experiences there. Personally, to be honest with all of you, I myself have gone to that place to explore, not once, not twice, but many times, certainly out of curiosity. Luckily for me, I did not have any encounters with them. Initially, when my friends suggested visiting that place, I thought it was just another location that was uninhabited, where people start creating stories about seeing ghosts. But the moment I saw the building in the distance, the hairs on my arms were already standing on end. The closer I got, the scarier it became. All the girls we brought along were clutching the hands of the males, constantly tugging and urging us to turn back. But the more they tugged, the more determined we all became. And, not long after, we found ourselves at the entrance. The entire building was engulfed in darkness, and I could feel my adrenaline rushing. The feeling was indescribable, unless you were there to experience it yourself. Finally, due to the horrific sight and overwhelming fear, we turned back and headed towards the bus stop. That was a personal experience, and now I am about to start the story that occurred with my friend. My friend, a Malay female who is turning 28 this year. Her name is Siti. This incident happened a long time ago when she was only 16. That was when Old Changi Hospital was still functioning. On that fateful night, she decided to visit her friend who was admitted to the hospital. Accompanying her were two of her other friends, both female. As all of them were feeling lazy, they decided to take a shortcut on the side of the building facing the car park. It was a flight of stairs leading to the second story of the building. Due to the silence and isolation that surrounded the region, few people dared to use that staircase. As they were about to climb the stairs, something caught my friend's eye. She turned around and, to her horror, she saw a white figure hanging on a tree situated nearby. It was white. Long hair was spreading outwards. She could not see its face because the back was facing her. She was dumbfounded, her legs rooted to the ground. She could not move but kept staring at it. One of her friends saw it and fainted on the spot, while the other, who still had the presence of mind to understand what was happening, rushed up and called a few male friends who were already there to come down. By the time they arrived, that figure was already nowhere in sight. But my friend Siti was still in a daze, her eyes still fixed on the tree. And here's the funny part. She actually peed in her pants. It took some time for her to regain her senses, and when she finally came around, she realized that her friends were shaking her vigorously before she broke down into tears. The guys kept asking what had happened, but I guess only the three ladies know for sure. The reason I am telling all of you this is in the hope that you will learn a lesson from other people's experiences, especially those who are mischievous. Never let your curiosity get the better of you, because curiosity killed the cat. You might not know that you could be the next victim. It's best to keep away from them, and they won't come to harass you. At the age of 9, I was frequently admitted as an asthma patient at the old Tan Tock Seng Hospital. I became familiar with each nurse and doctor who treated me during my stays. I was usually admitted to a particular ward, Ward 42 on the second floor of the ward block, right at the end, situated beside a garden. As it was a children's ward, there was only one toilet, and it had to be kept locked to prevent potential floods from burst pipes, thanks to us mischievous kids. To use it, we had to get the key from the nurse's station at the entrance to the ward. A nurse would accompany us to lock the toilet afterward. One night, unable to hold it any longer, I took the toilet key from its box without asking the nurse's permission, as there was no nurse present at the station. As I struggled to unlock the toilet door, I felt someone behind me. I turned around to see a nurse I'd never met before. She looked exceptionally radiant and asked, "Do you need any help with that?" I hurriedly handed her the key, and she waited until I finished. She locked the toilet afterward, which was normal, but then she handed the key back to me, instructing me to return it. This was strange since the nurse would typically return it herself. She smiled at me and opened a door leading to a staircase beside the toilet. As far as I knew, that door was always locked, but she opened it anyway. After returning the key, I went back to sleep. The next day, I recounted the incident to a nurse who explained that she and her two colleagues were busy attending to a newly admitted girl the previous night. There could have been no other nurse in the ward besides them. So, who was that nurse I met? During my psychiatry rotation as an intern, I was on duty with one resident. Around 3 a.m. I was in my call room, located on the mezzanine of the psych wards, when I heard loud footsteps ascending the mezzanine and moving around just outside my door. I initially ignored it, but after a while, the footsteps descended noisily. This happened a few more times, about 3 times in total. By the third instance, I was starting to get annoyed because I was trying to finish my census. Thinking it might be the resident on duty, I called out, "Doctor, is that you?" There was no response, so I ventured out to explore the entire mezzanine area. Finding no one there, I went down to the main wards and asked the guard stationed just outside the mezzanine door if the resident had gone up. The guard simply looked at me and said, "Sorry, doctor. No one has gone up to your call room since 10 p.m. You were the last one to enter. The doctor returned to his room before you did." Concerned that a psychiatry patient might have sneaked out, I checked, but all the patients were present and accounted for. By then I was feeling panicked, and the nurses were already discussing what I had heard. Ultimately, I left the area and begged the orthopedics department to let me sleep in their call room. Needless to say, I never returned alone to the psychiatry department's mezzanine area. This incident happened when a group of friends and I decided to check out the old Changi hospital. When we reached there, I decided to turn off my phone for who knows what reason. Well, I did, and after about an hour's worth of unsuccessful exploring, we decided to leave. It was already around 11:30 at night by then. We took the bus and ended up relaxing at Tampine's Central Park. I turned my phone back on, and there was one new voice message. I accessed my mailbox, wondering who was the one who had left me a voice message. What I heard on the message really freaked me out. It was a lady speaking in a very raspy voice in Malay. "You get out of here now. Don't disturb me." and in the background was the sound of a baby crying. I checked the time the message was sent, and it was 11:10 p.m., about the same time we passed by the maternity wards. Pretty weird, but I guess if you want to try it out for yourself, you could. Just sign up for the outing and turn off your phone. This happened to my Malay colleague who went ghost hunting with her significant other and his friends at Old Changi Hospital during the 7th month. They were walking to a bench when her SO's friend decided to take out his mobile phone to film them, hoping to capture an image of a ghost. When they approached the bench, my friend and her SO sat down. They were all playing around and joking, saying, "How come no ghost?" It was then their friend noticed that though he couldn't see anything behind them, when he looked into his phone, which was still recording, he could clearly see a figure with shoulder-length hair, wearing a long-sleeved white dress. He couldn't see the face because of the poor lighting. He was scared stiff, and for a while didn't say anything. When my friend and her SO jokingly asked, "Why is he so pale? Did he see a ghost?" He just kept telling them over and over again that he didn't feel well, and that they should go back. My friend and her SO then boldly said, "Are you scared? What? There's nothing here." It was then they all heard a loud shrieking, followed by sounds of laughter from behind my friend and her SO. Needless to say, they all ran away after that. I think that video is still making its way around, last I heard. If only my phone had enough memory to store the video, then I could forward it to those who'd like to see it. I've seen it, and it's really creepy.